This is a secret motorway in North Wales, except it isn't because it's the A55. Yes, it looks like a motorway, only permitted vehicles can use it, it's not a public right-of-way, the junctions are grade separated, and are we absolutely sure that it's not a motorway? If it looks like a motorway and quacks like a motorway, it's probably a motorway, and today we're going to talk about it. My name is John, welcome to Auto Shenanigans. Why not consider subscribing? A55. It looks like ass, but the road itself is one of the most important roads in Wales, running for around 90 miles between Chester, England and Holyhead in Anglesey. But the secret motorway, and bit that we're looking at today, makes up a small 10-mile section of the road between Llandewlys and Conwy, and it was built as a new road to replace the old and inadequate A55. The previous A55, today known as the A547, ran through all of the coastal towns and villages connecting them up, which makes a lot of sense. And in the old days, that was fine. But as time went on, the traffic size and numbers increased to the point where the road was way over capacity, and this was ruining the lives of residents. Other sections of the A55 were upgraded to dual carriageways as early as the 1930s, and over the course of the next few decades, the rest of the A55 would be upgraded, except for our 10-mile secret motorway, not a motorway. With the other sections, it was quite an easy job where they could utilise the old A55's alignment. You're just bolting on another lane or two, so that's fine. But the Llandewlys to Conwy section turned out to be a right pain in the arse, mainly because there's no space to just add on more lanes. To do so would result in half the towns being demolished. To the north there's a bit of a sea, and to the south miles of cliffs, quarries and old mines. And oh yeah, there's a railway, annoyingly already built on what would be the perfect place for a dual carriageway. To say space was limited would be an understatement, but somehow they managed to squeeze in the upgraded A55, building it on a completely new alignment. Because it was such a hassle, the first stage of the road wouldn't open until 1984, the second stage 1985, and the final part in 1991, although there's a good reason for the delay, which we'll look at later, because for now I'm at the Llandewlys interchange, or Junction 23, where we find the start of our secret motorway. Actually, it's the end, but we're heading west, so don't worry about it. The A55 to the east of the interchange was completed in 1968, and until 1984, the main carriageway connected up with what we now call the A547, perhaps a bit like this, and this explains why for a short distance the A547 is a dual carriageway. This would all change when our secret motorway was built. The existing A55 was connected to it, and the old A55 became the A547 with an odd dual carriageway section that today makes no sense. Speaking of making no sense, why is it a secret motorway and not a motorway? Because it's what the authorities refer to as a special road, which sits in between an A-road dual carriageway or trunk road and a motorway in terms of its importance. It's all very boring legislation stuff, but basically a trunk road is free to use by everyone, it's a public right-of-way. A motorway is not those things. For example, you can't walk or cycle on a motorway, and it's not a public right-of-way. A special road, such as the one that we're looking at, is like a motorway in as much as it shares much of a motorway's traffic regulations, but it is not classed as a motorway. Though it might as well be a motorway given the traffic restrictions and its 70-mile-an-hour speed limit. Until that is, you look at some of the junctions, like Junction 22. Yes, it's a grade-separated junction, but with such a small space to work with, it's definitely not to modern motorway standards. Sure, in the 1960s it would have been perfect and a triumph of engineering, but this road was built much later and would likely have required a completely different junction design if it were to be a motorway. Special road status means they can get away with more interesting junction solutions. But let's not get too carried away, because before we get to Junction 22 as a pair of abandoned or unused slip roads to look at, it's not clear as to the intended use, but I think they were used during the construction of the road to provide a way of moving building materials, possibly from the quarry just up the road, or maybe from a quarry that used to be situated at that location. If you take a look to your left when heading westbound, you'll notice a huge limestone cliff, which used to be a huge limestone hill extending to the shoreline, but we sort of dug it all up. However, that turned out to be a good thing, because it meant when constructing the A55, no tunnelling was required, and for the most part, the land was nice and level, perfect for a road. Also at this location is the unmissable Rainbow Bridge, a delightfully uncolourful concrete crime of a bridge that was constructed at the same time as the A55 in the 1980s. The story goes that it was supposed to be painted in rainbow colours to honour the nearby town of Old Conwy, which between 1979 and 1994 held the unusual world record of the longest rainbow, which lasted for 3 hours. As you can see, it is not painted in rainbow colours, and that's because somebody in a council office said, no, there is to be no fun, leave the hideous bridge as it is. Thank you very much. As we make our way along the A55 towards Conwy Bay, it lowers down into a cutting which gives the road an urban motorway sort of feel. Conwy Bay is known for its 3-mile-long sandy beach, but interestingly, it's man-made. They simply dumped several millions of tons of sand and the beach was created. After passing through the town, we arrive at Junction 20, which is different. Eastbound, you've got a couple of slip roads. While squeezed in, it's similar to Junction 22 that we saw earlier, and that's fine. It's on the westbound side where things get interesting. The slip roads are half a mile apart, and both feature 90-degree turns, which is absurd. On the exit slip road, you'll come barrelling down, turn the corner and promptly park your car in the rear end of a lorry that sat at the traffic lights that you didn't see until the last minute. It's clearly been set up this way because of the limited space that's available, and if the A55 were a proper motorway, there's no way you'd have built a junction like this, but I suppose it keeps you on your toes, doesn't it? Who doesn't like a bit of calamity whilst driving? At Junction 19 is a handy petrol station, and I wanted a coffee. Moving on. If you take a look at Junction 19 on an aerial photo, you'll notice that there's a gap running through the middle of its roundabout. It looks like there used to be a road here, but actually that's exactly the situation. Before the new A55 came along, the old A55, now A547, used to run through here following a route a bit like this. And my assumption is that whilst constructing the new A55, the road was left in place and the junction built around it, with the road removed once completed. For a short while, Junction 19 was where the new A55 came to an end, or started. At the junction, you'd have to have joined the local roads to continue your westbound journey whilst the remaining section was constructed. It wouldn't be until the early 1990s that it would be finished, and interestingly, or rather stupidly, at the point where the new section meets old is a set of 70-mile-an-hour speed limit signs. The thing is, the speed limit is the same on both sides in either direction, so there isn't any need for them to be there. Either way, you'll notice that the speed limit signs are 70 miles an hour and not the national speed limit sign like you'd find on a motorway or a normal dual carriageway. The reason for this is boring legislation stuff. The national speed limit can't be applied to a special road because when the national speed limit was invented, special roads weren't really a thing and the legislation was never updated, meaning a special road has to have signs with a numbered speed limit. Getting back to the road, and the last section of Special A55 was delayed in its construction due to the small matter of the River Conwy, which isn't a small matter at all. In the old days, you'd have crossed the river by ferry, but this was deemed as rubbish, and in the 1820s, work began on building a road bridge across the river. Now, you could build a massive bridge across the whole thing, but a different solution was applied, where they built an embankment in the river, creating a stretch of reclaimed land to run a road, and then later a railway. This meant that the bridge structure could be a lot smaller, and given the vastness of the river here, that probably made a lot of sense. The bridge they built was designed by Thomas Telford, opening in 1826 as one of the world's first road suspension bridges. And whilst it is an impressive structure, it was a bit crap as a road transport solution because the road had to make its way awkwardly around Conwy Castle. A new and better road bridge was built to replace it in the 1950s, but parts of the original road, which at the time was the A55, remain in place as footpaths. The new bridge would carry the A55 over the river until the 1990s, when a much better solution was put in place. Rather than use a bridge, they constructed a tunnel for the A55 to utilise. Running for just under a mile, it's what's known as an immersed tube tunnel, and it was the first use of such a structure in the UK. What you do is dredge out a large channel on the riverbed and then sink pre-built sections of the tunnel into the channel. In this case, there were 6 sections at 118 metres long each. When they're all connected up, they form a tube, hence the name, and as tunnel construction goes, it's a fairly quick, if expensive, method of construction. The materials removed from the riverbed didn't go to waste though. The Eastern Tunnel approach, along with Junction 18, were all built on lands that previously didn't exist. Looking at an old map shows how the land was created by the waste material being piled up along the coastline, which allowed for the road and tunnels construction. The huge tunnel sections were cast in a purpose-built basin. Today it's a lovely marina for some good old motorboating, but it was once a huge and horrible industrial site where each of the 30,000-tonne tunnel sections would be manufactured before being floated into position and immersed underwater. After exiting the western end of the tunnel, you'll quickly arrive at Junction 17, which definitely is, and it's at this point the special section of the A55 comes to an end, or begins. The main carriageway from this point on is built on the old A55's alignment, but why weren't more parts of the A55 made into special sections? The simple reason is that other parts of the A55 don't have an alternative route owing to the terrain. It's A55 or not at all, and because of that, we can't restrict any traffic from using it. Farmer Jones still needs to get around around on his tractor. The special section of the A55 gets away with it because the old A55, now A547, along with many other roads, are available for use, so it's no problem having traffic restrictions, and you wouldn't want a tractor slowing you down unnecessarily. And it's for similar reasons that the entire length of the A55 can't be a motorway. If it was, you'd need to build a whole load of other roads for restricted traffic to use, and the layout of the land makes it incredibly difficult and expensive, so it's just not practical to have a motorway. However, the A55's secret motorway special road is as close as we're going to get, and whilst it may not be perfect, it demonstrates some amazing solutions to several road engineering challenges, and it's now considered to be the most important road and route in Wales, second only to the M4 motorway, and I know which I'd rather drive on. Thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye.